The rain pattered against the windows, turning the city lights into blurry watercolors that bled across the glass. I wiped down another table, my fingers raw from the cheap sanitizer we used, the smell of bleach mixing with the lingering scents of garlic, basil, and red wine. Trattoria Bella Notte wasn't much. Just another Italian restaurant tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. But it was my anchor in a storm of unpaid bills and broken dreams. "Emma, table 7 needs more bread," Marco called from behind the counter, his voice tinged with the fatigue that came from running a restaurant 16 hours a day. "On it," I replied, tucking a strand of my chestnut hair behind my ear. My feet ached in the black non-slip shoes I'd bought secondhand, the memory of my art school tuition bills hanging over me like a guillotine. 1 more month of double shifts, I promised myself. 1 more month, and maybe I could make the minimum payment. The Friday night crowd had thinned as midnight approached. Only 3 tables remained occupied. A young couple lost in each other's eyes, a group of college students splitting the cheapest pasta dish on the menu, and table 12, tucked in the corner beneath the soft glow of a vintage sconce. I'd noticed him the moment he walked in. It was impossible not to. He hadn't arrived like our usual customers, rushing in from the rain with hunched shoulders and dripping umbrellas. Instead, the door had opened, and the ambient noise of the restaurant had simply stopped. A broad-shouldered man had entered first, his eyes scanning the room with mechanical precision before nodding almost imperceptibly. Only then had he walked in. Tall, with shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit to perfection, he moved with the fluid confidence of a predator that had never needed to rush. His black hair, touched with silver at the temples, was slicked back from a face that seemed carved from Italian marble. All sharp angles and shadows, but it was his eyes that made my breath catch, dark as espresso and just as intense, missing nothing as they swept across the room. A second man followed behind him, equally vigilant but clearly deferential. They were led to table 12, the best in the house, without even having to ask. I wasn't supposed to serve that section tonight, but Lucia, who usually handled the VIP corner, had whispered frantically to Marco, her face pale. 5 minutes later, I was told I'd be taking the table instead. "Just don't screw it up," Marco had hissed, a bead of sweat trailing down his temple. "Whatever he wants, he gets. Understand?" I didn't. Not really, but I nodded anyway. The men at the table hadn't looked at the menus. The 2 who'd entered first, clearly bodyguards, though I'd only seen such things in movies, remained standing until the central figure gave them a subtle nod. They took positions at nearby tables, their backs to their boss, but their eyes constantly moving. "Good evening, sir," I'd said, proud that my voice didn't betray the inexplicable tension gripping my chest. "May I tell you about our specials?" When he looked up, his gaze hit me like a physical force. "That won't be necessary. I'll have the osso buco with the 82 Barolo." His English was perfect, but beneath it ran the melodic undercurrent of an Italian accent, smooth as aged whiskey. I blinked. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't think we have—" "Check with the owner," he'd interrupted, those dark eyes never leaving mine. "Marco keeps it for special occasions." He'd been right. Marco nearly tripped over himself bringing up a dusty bottle from a cellar I didn't even know existed. I'd watched, mystified, as my normally stoic boss treated this stranger with the deference usually reserved for royalty. Throughout the meal, I'd felt his eyes on me as I served other tables. Not in the way men sometimes looked, I was well versed in ignoring those stares, but with an intensity that seemed to peel back my skin and examine what lay beneath. I'd never felt so seen and so invisible simultaneously. Now, as the night wound down, I approached his table with the leather check presenter. He'd finished his meal nearly an hour ago, but had remained, occasionally making a call in rapid Italian, his voice too low for me to catch more than the rhythmic rise and fall of his native tongue. "Was everything to your satisfaction, sir?" I placed the folder discreetly at his elbow. He looked up, and I noticed for the first time the thin scar that traced from his right eyebrow down his cheek, so faint it was visible only this close. Everything was unexpected. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "You're new here." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. 6 months, sir. He studied me for a moment longer before reaching into his suit jacket. The movement caused it to open slightly, and I glimpsed the holster nestled against his ribs. My blood turned to ice water. I'd grown up in a rough neighborhood. I knew what that meant. He placed a sleek black credit card in the folder without checking the bill. "Run it and bring it back." I hurried to the terminal, my mind racing. Whoever he was, he carried a gun, and Marco treated him like a visiting dignitary. As I processed his payment, the total with tip exceeding what I made in 3 days, I watched from the corner of my eye as he stood, buttoning his jacket with elegant precision. His bodyguards immediately moved into formation around him. When I returned with his card and receipt, he was already walking toward the door, his guards clearing a path. One remained by the table, watching me intently as I placed the folder down. I noticed then, half hidden under the napkin, the edge of what appeared to be an expensive leather wallet. "Sir," I called out instinctively, picking it up. "You forgot your—" The man paused at the door, turning slowly. Something flashed in those dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Before it was masked by cool indifference. For a terrifying moment, the entire restaurant held its breath. "Keep it," he said finally, his voice carrying easily across the hushed space. "Consider it a tip." Then he was gone, leaving behind nothing but the lingering scent of expensive cologne and an atmosphere so tense it could snap. Marco appeared at my elbow, his face ashen. "What did you do?" I looked down at the wallet in my hands, butter-soft leather that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "He left this behind. I tried to return it." Marco snatched it from my grasp. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea who that was?" I shook my head, a creeping sense of dread building in my stomach. "That," Marco hissed, glancing nervously at the door, "was Alessio Vicario." The name meant nothing to me. "He owns half the city," Marco continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The parts you don't read about in the tourist brochures. If he left his wallet, it was because he wanted to." I frowned, confused. "But why would anyone deliberately leave their wallet?" Marco looked at me like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. "Who knows why a man like that does anything, but whatever game he's playing, we are not part of it." He thrust the wallet back into my hands. "Call the number on his business card, return it, and pray he doesn't remember your face." That night, I sat on my threadbare couch in my tiny apartment, staring at the wallet on my coffee table as if it might suddenly sprout fangs. I should have just left it at the restaurant. But Marco had been adamant. This was my problem to fix. With trembling fingers, I finally opened it. Inside, I found several credit cards, a driver's license with his stone-faced photo, and most alarmingly, nearly $5,000 in cash. Who carried that kind of money? Tucked into one of the pockets was a simple black business card. No company name, just Alessio Vicario, in silver embossed letters and a phone number. My finger hovered over my phone's keypad. It was after 2 a.m., too late to call anyone, especially someone like him, but the thought of carrying around a virtual stranger's wallet, containing enough cash to solve all my immediate problems, made sleep impossible. Before I could reconsider, I dialed the number. It rang only once before a man answered. Not him. One of his guards, perhaps. "Yes?" The voice was clipped, suspicious. My name is Emma Conti. I'm a waitress at Trattoria Bella Notte. Mr. Vicario left his wallet at the restaurant tonight, and I was hoping to return it to him." A long pause followed. I could hear muffled voices in the background. "Address?" the voice finally demanded. I hesitated. "Excuse me?" "Your address. For pickup." My heart hammered against my ribs. Give my address to strange men who worked for a guy who carried a gun and thousands in cash? "I'd rather bring it to him," I said quickly, "or meet somewhere public." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, unexpectedly, I heard a different voice. His voice, in the background, followed by what sounded like a soft laugh. The phone changed hands. "Ms. Conti." His voice slid through the receiver like smoke. How unexpected. I swallowed hard. "Mr. Vicario, I have your wallet. You left it at the restaurant. Did I?" He sounded amused. "And you're calling at this hour to return it?" I'm sorry about the time. I just thought..." What did I think? That a man like him would be frantically canceling credit cards like a normal person? Honesty is a rare quality, Ms. Conti. There was something in his tone I couldn't identify. Approval? Curiosity? Most people would have seen the cash and made different choices. I'm not most people, I replied, immediately regretting the boldness in my tone. To my surprise, he laughed, a rich, deep sound that sent an inexplicable shiver down my spine. Clearly not. Tell me, do you work tomorrow? Yes. Lunch shift, 11 to 4. I'll send a car for you at 4:15. Bring the wallet then. It wasn't a request. Before I could protest, the line went dead. I stared at my phone in disbelief. A car? To take me where exactly? Every crime show I'd ever watched flashed through my mind, each scenario more terrifying than the last. But something deeper, more instinctive, told me that if Alessio Vicario had wanted to harm me, he wouldn't have bothered with this elaborate setup. The wallet? The phone call? It felt like a test, but for what purpose? Sleep evaded me that night. I lay awake, replaying our brief interactions, trying to decipher what game this dangerous man was playing, and why, of all people, he'd chosen me as a participant. The next day crawled by in a haze of anxiety. I dropped 2 plates, mixed up orders, and jumped every time the door opened. Marco watched me with narrowed eyes but said nothing. At exactly 4:15, as I stepped outside into the golden afternoon light, a sleek black Maserati idled at the curb, the back window lowered, revealing the same guard from last night. Ms. Conti, he said flatly. Mr. Vicario is waiting. My feet felt leaden as I approached the car. Every instinct screamed to run, to forget the wallet and this mysterious man with his penetrating gaze. But something else, curiosity perhaps, or the strange magnetic pull I'd felt since he first walked into the restaurant, propelled me forward. As I slid into the back seat, the rich scent of leather enveloped me. The driver pulled away from the curb with smooth precision, merging into traffic as if other cars simply made way for us. Perhaps they did. I clutched my bag containing his wallet, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Whatever test Alessio Vicario was conducting, I had a sinking feeling I was already failing. But as the city blurred past the tinted windows, one thought crystallized with startling clarity. I wanted to pass. The Maserati glided through the city streets like a shark through dark water. I sat rigidly in the back seat, the leather too smooth, too perfect against my waitress uniform that smelled faintly of marinara sauce and dish soap. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with a military haircut, hadn't spoken a single word since I'd entered the car. Neither had the guard in the passenger seat, whose eyes constantly scanned our surroundings as if expecting an ambush. As we left the familiar grid of downtown behind, my anxiety spiked. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice sounding small in the hermetically sealed luxury of the car. The guard turned slightly, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Vicario's residence." His residence. The words hung in the air like a threat, or a promise. I clutched my bag tighter, feeling the outline of his wallet inside. Such a small thing to cause such disruption in my carefully constructed life of anonymity. We turned onto a tree-lined avenue where mansions hid behind wrought iron gates and immaculate hedges. The farther we drove, the larger the properties became. Until finally, the car slowed before an imposing gate flanked by stone pillars. A discreet camera swiveled toward us. The guard pressed a button, spoke a few words in Italian, and the gate swung open silently. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, not the ostentatious gardens I might have expected, but a tasteful landscape of Italian cypress trees and architectural topiaries. The house itself rose before us, a modernist interpretation of a Tuscan villa, all clean lines and warm stone that caught the late afternoon sun like amber. 2 men in dark suits appeared as the car stopped at the entrance. One opened my door, while the other conferred briefly with our driver. I stepped out, my legs unsteady beneath me. "This way, Ms. Conti," one of them said, gesturing toward massive double doors of dark wood and iron. The foyer beyond was a study in understated wealth, soaring ceilings, marble floors, and walls adorned with what I recognized, even with my incomplete art degree, as museum-quality paintings. A Caravaggio hung opposite a small but unmistakable Botticelli, their presence in a private home nearly blasphemous. You appreciate art. The voice came from a doorway to my right. I turned to find Alessio Vicario watching me, his expression unreadable. He'd exchanged his business suit for charcoal trousers and a crisp white shirt, open at the collar, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin. Without the formality of his suit jacket, he seemed both more human and more dangerous. I was an art student, I replied, unsure why I was sharing this with him. Before I had to drop out, something flickered across his face. Interest, perhaps. What made you leave? Money. I saw no reason to lie, or the lack of it. He nodded as if my answer confirmed something for him. Come, he said, turning without waiting for my response. We'll talk in my study. I followed him down a hallway lined with what appeared to be family photographs spanning generations. Serious men in old-fashioned suits standing beside elegant women, their expressions uniformly solemn. At the end of the corridor, he opened a door into a room that felt like stepping into another century. Unlike the modern aesthetic of the rest of the house, the study was all old-world charm. Dark woods, leather-bound books, and a massive desk that looked like it had witnessed the signing of historic treaties. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked immaculate gardens, and beyond them, the glittering skyline of the city. Please, sit. He gestured to a leather chair positioned across from the desk. I perched on the edge, hyper-aware of my surroundings, and the man whose presence seemed to fill every corner of the room. I pulled his wallet from my bag and placed it on the desk between us. You could have kept it, he said, making no move to take it. The cash alone would have solved your financial difficulties, at least temporarily. It wasn't mine to keep, I replied simply. He studied me with those fathomless dark eyes. Many would disagree. Many would see an opportunity and take it without hesitation. Is that what this was? An opportunity? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Perhaps a test. I don't understand. But even as I said it, pieces began falling into place. The deliberate way he'd left the wallet, the amount of cash inside, the business card with his number. You left it on purpose. He leaned back in his chair, regarding me with newfound interest. I make it a point to understand the character of people in my orbit, Ms. Conti. Money reveals truth more effectively than any interrogation. I'm not in your orbit, I countered, discomfort and indignation warring within me. I'm just a waitress who served you dinner once. And yet, here you are. His gaze swept over me, not in the lecherous way I'd grown accustomed to deflecting, but with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating a rare acquisition. I shifted uncomfortably. Why me? Why this test? He rose suddenly, moving to a sideboard where crystal decanters caught the fading sunlight. Would you like a drink? No, thank you. The last thing I needed was alcohol clouding my judgment. He poured himself what looked like whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. You remind me of someone, he said finally, his back still to me. Someone I lost many years ago. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpectedly personal. When he turned back, his expression had hardened again, the momentary vulnerability gone so completely, I wondered if I'd imagined it. But that's not the only reason. He returned to his desk, setting his glass down without drinking from it. Your employer, Marco. Do you know much about him? The abrupt change in topic left me disoriented. Only that he owns the restaurant. Alessio made a sound that might have been a laugh, though there was no humor in it. Marco owns nothing. The restaurant, like many businesses in that district, belongs to me. The revelation hit me like cold water. You're his boss? In a manner of speaking. He picked up the wallet finally, tucking it into his pocket without checking its contents. The implicit trust, or perhaps indifference to the money, spoke volumes about his wealth. Marco has been stealing from me for nearly a year. Small amounts, skimmed from the books, but theft nonetheless. My stomach dropped. I had nothing to do with... I know. He cut me off with a dismissive wave. Marco's crimes are his own, but it raised the question of who else in my establishment might be untrustworthy. So you tested all the staff? I asked, thinking of Lucia's strange behavior the previous night. Only those who caught my attention. His eyes locked with mine, and for a terrifying moment, I couldn't look away. You passed, Emma. rather spectacularly. The use of my first name sent an unexpected shiver through me. What happens to those who fail? They find employment elsewhere. His tone made it clear the conversation on that topic was finished. But enough about Marco. Tell me about yourself. The command, delivered so casually, threw me. There's not much to tell. I disagree. He leaned forward slightly. 23 years old, daughter of Italian immigrants, third generation on your father's side, second on your mother's. Art student at the Metropolitan Institute until financial hardship forced withdrawal. No living parents. One younger sister currently attending state college on a partial scholarship. Ice flooded my veins. How do you... I make it my business to know things, Emma. The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, made my skin prickle. Particularly about people who interest me. And I interest you because I remind you of someone, I said flatly, fighting the unnerving sensation of being laid bare before him. Partly. He took a sip of his whiskey, watching me over the rim of the glass. But also because you possess qualities that are increasingly rare in this world. Integrity, resilience, pride without arrogance. You can't possibly know all that from one dinner service and a wallet. Can I? The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Your hands. They're calloused from work, but you have an artist's attention to detail. You dropped out of school not because you lacked talent or drive, but because you prioritize your sister's education over your own. You work double shifts at a mediocre restaurant when your talents clearly lie elsewhere, and you do it without complaint. Each observation stripped away another layer of my anonymity, leaving me feeling naked and vulnerable. What do you want from me, Mr. Vicario? Alessio, he corrected, the Italian pronunciation rolling off his tongue like silk. And I'm offering you an opportunity, Emma. A real one, not a test. My guard immediately went up. What kind of opportunity? I'm in need of someone with your specific qualities. My household requires a personal assistant. Someone discreet, observant, and unquestioningly honest. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. You want me to be your assistant? I have no qualifications for... You have exactly the qualifications that matter, he interrupted. The rest can be taught, and if I refuse, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then you walk out that door, return to Trattoria Bellanotte, and continue your life exactly as before. This isn't an offer made under duress, Emma. I'm not that kind of man. But he was some kind of man, the kind who carried a gun, who commanded fear with his mere presence, who referred to a restaurant owner's theft as crimes, the kind of man my father had warned me about in whispered cautionary tales. What would this job entail? I asked, playing for time while my mind raced. You would manage my personal schedule, coordinate with my security team, handle sensitive correspondence, and ensure the smooth operation of my household. He spoke as if reciting a normal job description, though nothing about this situation felt normal. In return, you would receive a salary that would allow you to complete your education and assist your sister with hers, private accommodations here on the estate, a car at your disposal. It sounded too good to be true, because it almost certainly was, and the catch? His lips curved into something almost like a smile. Perceptive. The catch, as you put it, is absolute loyalty. What you see, what you hear within these walls remains here. My business affairs are complicated. My associates, not always the sort one would invite to dinner. You're talking about illegal activities, I said bluntly. He didn't flinch. I'm talking about a world that operates by different rules than the one you're accustomed to. The mafia, I whispered, the realization washing over me like ice water. Alessio didn't confirm or deny it, but his silence was answer enough. Consider it, Emma. Take a day, a week if necessary. The position remains open until I find the right person. He stood, indicating our meeting had concluded. In the meantime, you'll find an envelope in your bag. Consider it compensation for your time today. I hadn't noticed him, or anyone, touching my bag. But when I reached inside, my fingers found a thick envelope that hadn't been there before. I pulled it out, started to open it. Not here, he said sharply. Count it in private. I rose on shaky legs, clutching my bag and the mysterious envelope. I'll think about your offer. He nodded once, then pressed a button on his desk. Almost immediately, the door opened, and one of his guards appeared. Antonio will see you home. As I followed the silent guard back through the maze of hallways, my mind whirled with confusion, fear, and, most disturbing of all, temptation. The salary he offered would solve every financial problem crushing me. I could finish my degree, help Sophia with her tuition, maybe even start painting again, but at what cost? Outside, twilight had fallen, painting the manicured grounds in shades of lavender and indigo. A different car waited, still black, still expensive, but less conspicuous than the Maserati. As Antonio held the door for me, I glanced back at the house, feeling the weight of Alessio's gaze though I couldn't see him. The drive back to my apartment passed in silence. When we pulled up to my shabby building, Antonio spoke for the first time. Mr. Vicario doesn't make this kind of offer lightly. His tone was neutral, but his implication clear. He sees something in you. I clutched my bag tighter. That's what worries me. Inside my tiny apartment, I locked the door and slid the security chain into place, though I doubted it would stop anyone Alessio sent if he changed his mind about the voluntary nature of his offer. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Cash spilled onto my coffee table, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. Tucked among the bills was a small card with an elegant script, for consideration. AV. I sank onto my couch, staring at the money that represented both salvation and damnation. The wallet had been a test, one designed to reveal my character. But this offer, this was a test of my soul. As night fell outside my window, I remained frozen in indecision, torn between the life I knew and the uncertain future Alessio Vicario offered. A future that promised financial security, but demanded I turn a blind eye to whatever complicated business affairs he conducted. A future tied to a man whose dark eyes seemed to see straight through to my core. The man was dangerous. Everything about him screamed it. But the most frightening realization of all was the undeniable pull I felt toward him, like a moth to a flame that would inevitably consume me. Sleep eluded me that night, my thoughts circling like vultures around Alessio's offer. By dawn, the money still lay untouched on my coffee table, both temptation and accusation. I got ready for my morning shift mechanically, the motions of showering and dressing offering none of their usual comfort. The restaurant felt different when I arrived, quieter, tense. Marco's eyes followed me as I tied my apron, his usual gruffness replaced by something that looked unsettlingly like fear. He called me this morning, Marco said without preamble when I approached the bar for my table assignments. I didn't need to ask who he was. About what? Marco's hands trembled slightly as he arranged glasses. He said you'd be taking a leave of absence. Effective immediately. His eyes, bloodshot and wary, finally met mine. What have you gotten yourself into, Emma? Nothing, I said automatically, though the word felt hollow. I haven't agreed to anything. Listen to me. Marco lowered his voice, glancing nervously at the kitchen doors. Whatever he's offering, it's not worth it. Men like Vicario don't make offers. They create debts. Debts that can never be repaid. The warning sent ice through my veins. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Marco's gaze dropped. Why do you think I started skimming from the books? I needed a way out, a new identity, a chance to disappear before... He cut himself off, his weathered face creasing with resignation. It doesn't matter now. He knows. Marco, Go home, Emma. He turned away, shoulders slumped in defeat. Your shift's been covered, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I left the restaurant in a daze, the bright morning sunshine at odds with the shadow that seemed to have fallen over my life. Marco's warning echoed in my mind, reinforcing the doubts that had kept me awake all night. Yet beneath the fear lurked something else, a curiosity about Alessio Vicario that I couldn't seem to quell. The glimpse of vulnerability when he'd mentioned someone he'd lost, the intensity in his gaze when he'd spoken of qualities he valued. The undeniable electricity I'd felt in his presence. My phone rang as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Hello? I answered cautiously. Emma. Alessio's voice, smooth as aged bourbon, slid through the receiver. Have you considered my offer? I clutched the railing for support. I need more time. Time is a luxury, Emma. Something in his tone had changed. A subtle hardening that sent warning signals racing along my nerves. One that's rapidly running out for your former employer. My breath caught. What do you mean? Marco's theft was not his only transgression. The casual way he discussed potentially ruining a man's life made my stomach clench. The authorities might be interested in certain irregularities in his immigration status, not to mention the questionable sourcing of some of his inventory. You're threatening him to get to me, I said, anger temporarily overriding my fear. I'm stating facts, Alessio replied, his tone unchanged. Marco's fate was sealed the moment he decided to steal from me. Your decision simply determines the timing. The manipulation was so blatant it should have disgusted me. Instead, I found myself weighing options, calculating outcomes like a chess player backed into a corner. If I accept your offer, I said slowly, what happens to Marco? A pause, then, he keeps his restaurant, continues his life, minus the skimming. And if I refuse, then his future becomes considerably less certain. The threat hung in the air between us, unspoken but unmistakable. I closed my eyes, hating the position he'd put me in, hating more the fact that some small, treacherous part of me wanted to say yes, regardless of Marco. When do you need my answer? A car will arrive at your apartment at 7 this evening, he said, as if my acquiescence was already assured. Pack only what you value. Everything else can be replaced. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, the reality of the situation crashing over me in waves. This wasn't just about a job offer anymore. By returning the wallet, by engaging with Alessio at all, I'd somehow been drawn into a world where people's lives, including my own, were bargaining chips in games I didn't understand. My apartment, which had always felt like a cramped sanctuary, now seemed exposed and vulnerable. I moved through the rooms restlessly, touching familiar objects as if to anchor myself to the life I'd known. My easel, dust-covered from months of neglect. The photo of Sophia and me at her high school graduation, her face alight with the future I'd sacrificed my own dreams to secure. The envelope of cash still lay on the coffee table, a Pandora's box I'd been afraid to fully open. Now, with trembling fingers, I counted it, $20,000 more money than I'd ever possessed at one time. Enough to clear my immediate debts. Enough to help Sophia. Not enough to buy freedom from whatever web Alessio was spinning around me. At 6:30, I made my decision. I packed a single suitcase, clothes, art supplies, the few photos and mementos that mattered. I left most of the money on the table, taking only enough to cover my outstanding rent. Whatever path I was choosing, I wouldn't step onto it purchased like property. The black car arrived precisely at 7, sleek and anonymous against the curb. Antonio emerged, nodding respectfully as he took my suitcase. Mr. Vicario will be pleased, he said, opening the rear door. I haven't said yes yet, I replied, though the suitcase in his hand suggested otherwise. Antonio's expression didn't change. You're here, that's enough for now. The drive to Alessio's estate felt shorter this time, the unfamiliar landscape already taking on landmarks in my memory. We passed through the gates, up the winding drive, but instead of stopping at the main entrance, Antonio continued around the side of the house to a separate wing. Your accommodations, he explained, parking before a smaller but no less elegant entrance, private access, separate from the main household. He led me through a discreet door into a suite that took my breath away. A sitting room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, and a bathroom of marble and glass that belonged in a luxury hotel. Everything was decorated in shades of cream and pale blue, tasteful and expensive without being ostentatious. Mr. Vicario thought you would appreciate the light for your artwork, Antonio said, gesturing to an alcove by the windows, where an easel, far nicer than my dusty one, stood beside a table arranged with professional quality paints and brushes. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. How did he know? Mr. Vicario makes it his business to know, Antonio replied, echoing Alessio's words from the previous day. He'll see you in the study in 1 hour. Maria will show you the way when it's time. After Antonio left, I explored my new quarters with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The closet already contained clothes in my size. Simple, elegant pieces in fabrics I could never have afforded. The bathroom was stocked with high-end toiletries, their subtle scent reminiscent of the Mediterranean. On the bedside table sat a latest model laptop and a phone I hadn't asked for. It was as if Alessio had known I would say yes before I did. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down my spine. To be known, anticipated, provided for with such precision. At precisely 8 o'clock, a soft knock announced the arrival of Maria, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She led me through the labyrinthine house to the study where I'd met with Alessio the previous day. He stood with his back to the door, silhouetted against the night-darkened windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. When he turned, his eyes found mine immediately, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. "Emma," he said, my name in his mouth sounding both like a greeting and a claim. "You've made your decision." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm here." But not convinced. He moved closer, studying me with those fathomless eyes. "You left the money. I don't want to be bought." Something like approval flickered across his face. "Yet you came anyway. Why?" I could have mentioned Marco, the implicit threat against him serving as coercion, but the truth was more complicated, more dangerous. "Curiosity," I admitted finally. "About you. About this world you inhabit." He circled me slowly, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Sandalwood and something darker, more primal. Curiosity killed the cat, Ms. Conti. But satisfaction brought it back. I finished the saying, holding his gaze despite the nerves fluttering in my stomach. Alessio smiled then, a real smile that transformed his severe features into something startlingly handsome. "Indeed." He gestured to the chairs before his desk. "Shall we discuss the terms of your employment?" For the next hour, he outlined my duties with the precision of a military commander. I would manage his personal calendar, coordinate with his household staff, handle correspondence that didn't require his direct attention. I would accompany him to certain social events, take notes during business meetings that occurred in the house, ensure his private spaces remained private. "You will have complete access to the main areas of the house and grounds," he explained. "Certain rooms remain off-limits unless I specifically invite you. My security team will make those boundaries clear." "And if I cross them?" I asked. His expression hardened slightly. "Don't." The warning hung between us, a reminder of exactly who I was dealing with. Whatever veneer of civilization Alessio wore, whatever charm he could summon, underneath lurked something dangerous. A predator temporarily at rest. "There is one more thing," he said, reaching into his desk drawer. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it before me. "This is non-negotiable." I opened the box with trepidation. Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet, its single charm a small, intricately crafted key. "It's beautiful," I said uncertainly, "but I can't accept jewelry from—" "It's not jewelry," Alessio interrupted. "It's identification. Everyone in my inner circle wears something similar. A signal to those who know to look. It marks you as under my protection." The implications of those words, the ownership they suggested, sent a chill through me. "And if I refuse, then our arrangement ends before it begins." His tone left no room for negotiation. "I have enemies, Emma. This ensures you won't be mistaken for one of them." I lifted the bracelet from its velvet nest, its gold links cool against my skin. As Alessio watched, I fastened it around my wrist, the small key charm resting against my pulse point like a whispered secret. "Good," he said softly. "Now you belong to the household." The words felt weighted with meaning beyond their surface. I belong to something now, or perhaps to someone. The thought should have terrified me more than it did. As if reading my thoughts, Alessio's expression softened fractionally. "This arrangement benefits us both, Emma. You'll want for nothing as long as you remain loyal." "And how long does this arrangement last?" I asked, suddenly needing to understand the parameters of my new cage, no matter how gilded it might be. "That depends entirely on you." He rose, indicating our meeting had concluded. "Antonio will give you a tour of the grounds tomorrow. For tonight, familiarize yourself with your quarters. Your duties begin officially on Monday." As Maria led me back through the silent house, I felt the weight of the bracelet on my wrist, a tether binding me to Alessio Vicario and whatever dark world he inhabited. I'd made my choice, stepped willingly into his orbit. The question now was whether I'd be consumed by his gravity or find a way to maintain my own trajectory. In my suite, I stood before the windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. Somewhere beyond the perfectly manicured hedges and ornamental fountains lay the city, my old life. The freedom I'd traded for security, and the protection of a man I barely knew. A man who collected people the way others collected art, valuing their specific qualities, displaying them in settings designed to emphasize their worth. I touched the key charm on my bracelet, wondering what doors it was meant to open and which ones it would forever lock behind me. The following days passed in a blur of new routines and overwhelming information. Antonio guided me through the sprawling estate, introducing me to staff members whose eyes lingered curiously on my bracelet before their expressions shifted to careful neutrality. The household ran with military precision, security teams patrolling the perimeter, domestic staff maintaining the immaculate interior. A personal chef who prepared meals that made my restaurant experience seem amateur by comparison. Alessio himself remained an enigma, present yet distant. He would appear unexpectedly, in the library where I was studying the household management systems, in the garden where I'd stolen a moment to sketch the fountain, in the kitchen late one night when I'd ventured down for tea. Each encounter left me more intrigued and unsettled than the last. "You're adapting well," he observed on the fourth evening, finding me in his study organizing his calendar. "The staff speaks highly of you." I looked up from the computer, surprised by both his presence and the compliment. "I'm trying to learn quickly." He moved to stand behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body. "You have an artist's eye for detail." His hand came to rest on the back of my chair, not quite touching me, but near enough to make my skin prickle with awareness. "It serves you well in this role." I remained perfectly still, caught between the desire to lean away and the inexplicable urge to move closer. "Thank you." His fingers brushed my shoulder, so lightly it might have been accidental. "Join me for dinner tonight, 8 o'clock. It wasn't a request, but neither did it feel entirely like a command. Of course. After he left, I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Every interaction with Alessio felt charged with undercurrents I couldn't fully identify. Danger, certainly, but also something else, something that made my heart race and my thoughts scatter. At 8, Maria escorted me to a private dining room I hadn't seen before. Alessio waited, standing as I entered. He'd exchanged his usual business attire for a more casual look. Dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that softened his imposing presence without diminishing it. "Emma," he greeted me, pulling out my chair. "You look lovely." I'd chosen one of the dresses I'd found in my closet, a simple navy blue sheath that fit as if it had been tailored to my measurements. It probably had been. "Thank you." Dinner proceeded with surprising ease, the conversation flowing naturally from my adjustment to the household, to my background in art. Alessio revealed an impressive knowledge of art history, discussing movements and techniques with the confidence of a scholar. "You should resume your studies," he said, as dessert was served. A delicate tiramisu that rivaled any I'd tasted. "I've taken the liberty of arranging for a private tutor to help you prepare for re-entry into your program." I set down my fork, startled. "You did what?" "Your talents shouldn't be wasted," he said simply. "Your position here allows ample time for study. Unless you'd rather not continue your education?" "Of course I want to continue, but..." I struggled to articulate my discomfort. "You're making decisions about my life without consulting me." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I'm providing opportunities, Emma. What you do with them is your choice." The reminder of my supposed autonomy rang hollow in the face of his obvious control, yet the prospect of resuming my art education, the dream I'd reluctantly abandoned, was too tempting to reject out of pride. "Thank you," I said finally. "I would appreciate the chance to continue my studies." His expression softened fractionally. "Good. The tutor will begin next week." As we finished our meal, I gathered my courage to ask the question that had been nagging at me since our first meeting. "You said I remind you of someone. Who was she?" Alessio went still, his eyes growing distant. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly I had to lean forward to hear, "My sister. Valentina." The admission hung in the air between us, unexpectedly personal. "What happened to her?" "She died. Many years ago. His voice was controlled, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight whitening of his knuckles around his wine glass. She was collateral damage in a business dispute. The euphemism couldn't disguise the ugly truth. Someone had killed his sister to get to him, or perhaps as retaliation for something he'd done. The revelation should have terrified me, confirming as it did the violent world Alessio inhabited. Instead, I felt a strange compassion for the man behind the power, the brother who had lost his sister. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Was she an artist too?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, but she had your spirit, your integrity." His eyes met mine, their darkness lit with something that might have been grief, or might have been warning. It got her killed. The weight of Alessio's words, "it got her killed," hung between us like a shroud. His implication was clear. In his world, integrity could be a fatal flaw, rather than a virtue. I wondered if his interest in me was driven by some misguided attempt to save a ghost, to rewrite a history where his sister's moral compass had led to her destruction. "Is that why you brought me here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "To protect me from my own principles?" Alessio studied me, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps I brought you here to remind myself that such principles still exist." He stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "It's late. You should rest." That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed in sheets finer than any I'd ever known, haunted by the glimpse of humanity I'd seen in Alessio, the grief that had momentarily cracked his carefully maintained facade. It complicated the image I'd constructed of him as simply a dangerous man with dubious morals. What else lay beneath that controlled exterior? Days stretched into weeks, and I settled into a rhythm at the Vicario estate. My duties as Alessio's personal assistant kept me busy, but not overwhelmed. I organized his schedule, screened his correspondence, and gradually learned to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. The private art tutor he'd arranged turned out to be a retired professor from a prestigious university, and under her guidance, I felt my dormant skills awakening, stretching like muscles long unused. Alessio himself remained an enigma, sometimes distant and businesslike, other times unexpectedly attentive. He'd appear in the small studio he'd set up for me, watching silently as I painted. He'd join me for dinner without warning, engaging me in conversations that ranged from art history to philosophy to my childhood in a working-class neighborhood. Occasionally, his hand would brush mine when passing documents, his fingers lingering a moment too long, sending electricity racing through my veins. I tried to ignore the growing attraction I felt toward him. It was dangerous, inappropriate. Stockholm Syndrome, perhaps, or simply a response to the intensity of his attention. Yet I couldn't deny the way my heart raced when he entered a room, or how I found myself dressing more carefully on days I knew I'd see him. The household staff treated me with a curious mixture of respect and caution. I wasn't quite one of them, but neither was I entirely aligned with Alessio. I existed in a liminal space, marked by the gold bracelet that never left my wrist. Then came the night that changed everything. I was working late in the study, finalizing arrangements for an upcoming business trip to Milan. The house had settled into its nighttime quiet. Most of the staff retired to their quarters. Only security remained fully alert, their presence a constant shadow at the estate's perimeter. The sound of raised voices from the adjacent room, Alessio's private office, an area I'd been instructed never to enter uninvited, broke the stillness. I froze, pen hovering over my notebook. "You bring this to my home?" Alessio's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. "You put my household at risk?" Another voice, apologetic and frightened. "Boss, I didn't have a choice. They were closing in." "There is always a choice, Dante." The controlled fury in Alessio's tone sent ice through my veins. "You've made yours. Now I must make mine." I should have left immediately, retreated to my quarters, and pretended I'd heard nothing. Instead, I found myself moving closer to the partially open door, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't suppress. Through the crack, I could see Alessio standing with his back to me, his posture rigid with tension. Across from him stood a younger man, Dante, his face pale with fear, blood staining the sleeve of his expensive shirt. "Please, boss," Dante pleaded. "I've been loyal. 10 years. My father served your father, and he would be ashamed of your carelessness." Alessio's voice had dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "The FBI has been tracking that shipment for months. You were told to abandon it." My blood turned to ice. FBI. Shipments. The euphemisms were gone. The reality of Alessio's business laid bare in this unguarded moment. "Give me another chance," Dante begged. "I can fix this." Alessio sighed, a sound of weary resignation that frightened me more than his anger had. "No, Dante. Some mistakes can't be fixed." His hand moved to his waistband, and with fluid grace, he withdrew a gun, sleek, black, and undeniably real. My gasp was involuntary, too loud in the tense silence. Alessio's head snapped toward the door, his eyes finding mine through the narrow opening. In that frozen moment, I saw something flash across his face. Regret, perhaps, or resignation. "Emma," he said softly. "Come in." My legs moved of their own accord, carrying me into the room that had been forbidden until this moment. It was smaller than the main study, more intimate, with walls lined with security monitors and a safe built into one paneled section. The air smelled of gun oil and expensive cologne. Dante looked between us, desperation sharpening. "Who is she?" She heard everything. Silence. Alessio didn't raise his voice, but Dante flinched as if struck. "Emma is under my protection." I found my voice at last, though it emerged as barely a whisper. "What's happening?" Alessio studied me, his expression unreadable. "A business matter that requires resolution." He gestured toward the door with his free hand. "You should return to your quarters." It was an escape offer, a chance to pretend I'd seen nothing. But as I looked at Dante, trembling, bleeding, terrified, I couldn't walk away. "You're going to kill him." The words hung in the air between us, the unvarnished truth stripped of all pretense. "Yes," Alessio replied, his honesty more chilling than any denial would have been. "Because he made a mistake? Because his mistake could cost the lives of everyone in this house," Alessio countered, his eyes never leaving mine. "Including yours." My mind raced, searching for alternatives, for words that might diffuse this nightmare scenario. There must be another way. Something shifted in Alessio's expression, a softening around the edges that seemed incongruous with the gun in his hand. "You still believe in mercy, don't you?" A humorless smile touched his lips. "I lost that luxury many years ago." Dante watched our exchange with growing desperation. "Please," he said, addressing me now. "Tell him. I can disappear, start over somewhere else." I met Alessio's gaze, trying to find the man who had spoken so tenderly of his sister, who had created a studio for me, who discussed art with the passion of a true connoisseur. "Let him go," I said quietly. "Not for his sake, but for yours." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Alessio's expression remained impassive, but I could see the conflict raging behind his eyes. Finally, he lowered the gun. "Antonio!" he called, and immediately the door opened to reveal his most trusted security man. "Take Dante to the boathouse. Make the arrangements we discussed for Montevideo. He leaves tonight." Relief flooded through me, dizzying in its intensity. Dante's eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with grateful tears. "Thank you, boss. I won't forget." "If I ever see your face again," Alessio cut him off, his voice ice, "there will be no further mercy. Understand?" Dante nodded frantically as Antonio led him away. When the door closed behind them, Alessio turned to me, tucking the gun back into his waistband with practiced ease. "You disapprove of my methods," he stated, not a question but an observation. "I disapprove of murder," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Even when it's necessary, is it ever truly necessary?" He moved closer, his proximity sending a confusing mixture of fear and something else, something dangerous and electric, coursing through me. "You live in a world of ideals, Emma. I live in reality." "Your reality," I countered. "One you've created, one I was born into," he corrected, a rare hint of defensiveness in his tone. "One I've tried to improve, to civilize, within the constraints of its nature." I thought of the art on his walls, the books in his library, the careful attention he paid to beauty and order. a veneer of civilization over something fundamentally violent by being the most controlled predator in the jungle? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. An apt metaphor. Why did you listen to me? I asked suddenly. About Dante. You could have sent me away, done what you planned to do. Alessio was silent for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made my skin warm. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That there are choices beyond violence, even for men like me. And what am I to you exactly? The question had been building within me for weeks, demanding answer. He reached out slowly, as if approaching a skittish animal, and brushed his fingers along my cheek, a conscience I thought long dead. A reminder of who I might have been in another life. The touch sent electricity through my veins, at odds with the rational part of my brain screaming that this man was dangerous, that I had just witnessed how casually he contemplated ending a life. Yet I couldn't bring myself to pull away. Is that all? I whispered. His eyes darkened. No. The word hung between us, laden with unspoken meaning, but anything more would be complicated. Because of what you do, who you are. Because of who you are. His hand dropped away. Your integrity, your compassion, the very qualities that drew me to you are the ones most at risk in my world. I thought of his sister then, of the oblique warning he'd given me at dinner weeks ago. Like Valentina. Pain flashed across his features, quickly masked but undeniably real. Yes. In that moment of vulnerability, I saw the man beneath the mafia boss, someone shaped by loss and the brutal world he'd inherited, someone who recognized goodness, even if he believed himself incapable of it. Without fully understanding my own actions, I reached for him, my fingers curling around his wrist, where his pulse beat strong and steady. I'm not her, I said softly, and I made my choice when I came here. Alessio went still, his eyes searching mine. Did you? Or were you coerced by circumstances, by threats against Marco, by financial necessity? The question struck me with its unexpected self-awareness. I considered it seriously, trying to untangle the complex web of motivations that had brought me to this moment. At first, perhaps, I admitted. But I've had weeks to leave, to run. I stayed. Why? The question was barely audible. I took a deep breath, confronting the truth I'd been avoiding. Because despite everything, despite knowing what you are and what you do, I'm drawn to you. And that terrifies me more than any gun. Alessio moved with sudden purpose, closing the distance between us. His hand cupped the back of my neck, gentle yet commanding. It should terrify you, he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. I'm not a good man, Emma, I know. And I did know, had seen the evidence with my own eyes. Yet still, inexplicably, unforgivably, I tilted my face toward his. His lips met mine with restrained intensity, as if he feared I might shatter beneath his touch. I'd expected domination, possession, the same forceful control he exerted over every aspect of his life. Instead, I found tenderness edged with something like reverence. My hands moved of their own volition, sliding up his chest to curl around his shoulders. The solid strength of him under my fingers made the moment real in a way that my racing thoughts couldn't deny. I was kissing Alessio Vicario, a man who had contemplated murder minutes earlier, a man whose world operated by rules I barely comprehended. He deepened the kiss, one hand tangling in my hair while the other curved possessively around my waist, drawing me closer until I could feel the heat of his body through my clothes. The gun at his waistband pressed against my hip, a cold reminder of the danger he represented. Yet even that couldn't douse the fire building between us. When he finally pulled back, his eyes had darkened to obsidian, pupils dilated with desire. This changes things, he said, his voice rough with restraint. I nodded, unable to find words for the seismic shift I felt. The lines I'd drawn, employee and employer, innocent and criminal, right and wrong, had blurred beyond recognition. His thumb traced my lower lip, still sensitive from his kiss. I should send you away, he murmured. Back to your normal life, away from all of this. It would be the honorable thing to do. Is that what you want? I asked, both dreading and needing his answer. "What I want," he said carefully, "has never been more at odds with what is wise." His hand moved to cup my cheek, gentle despite the strength I knew it contained. "You've seen who I am tonight, Emma. What I'm capable of. There's no going back from that knowledge." "I know." And I did know. The memory of his gun pointed at Dante. The casual discussion of FBI surveillance and illicit shipments, the clear evidence that Alessio Vicario was exactly what Marco had implied, a powerful figure in organized crime. "And still, you stand here," he observed, wonder and concern mingling in his tone. "Still I stand here," I confirmed, as puzzled by my own actions as he seemed to be. He stepped back, creating space between us that felt both necessary and painful. "It's late. We both need time to think clearly without—" He gestured vaguely between us, indicating the charged atmosphere that made rational thought nearly impossible. I nodded, grateful for his restraint, even as part of me ached for him to continue what we'd started. "Good night, Alessio." His eyes softened at my use of his first name. "Good night, Emma." As I made my way back to my quarters, my mind churned with contradictions. I had witnessed Alessio's capacity for violence, yet also his willingness to show mercy. I had felt the danger he embodied, yet also a pull toward him that defied logic or self-preservation. What did that say about me, that I could know what he was and still want him? Sleep came eventually, but brought with it dreams of dark eyes and gentle hands that turned to nightmares of blood and guns and impossible choices. I woke disoriented, sunlight streaming through windows I still wasn't fully accustomed to, silk sheets tangled around my legs. A soft knock at my door jolted me fully awake. Maria entered with a breakfast tray and an envelope. "Mr. Vicario asked me to deliver this," she said, setting both on the table by the windows. Her eyes, usually warm, held a caution I hadn't seen before. "He's left for Milan. He'll return in 3 days. Left." Without a word, without a conversation about what had transpired between us, relief and disappointment warred within me as I took the envelope from the tray. "Thank you, Maria." After she departed, I opened the envelope with unsteady fingers. Inside was a short note in Alessio's elegant handwriting. "Emma, I've given you incomplete truths and asked for complete loyalty. This imbalance ends now, in the safe behind the Caravaggio in my study. You will find a file. The combination is your birth date. Read everything. When I return, you will make your choice with full knowledge of who I am and the world I inhabit. Until then, Alessio." I stared at the note, my breakfast forgotten. The safe behind the Caravaggio, in his private office, the room I'd been expressly forbidden to enter alone. Yet now he was granting me access, offering information he'd previously withheld. My curiosity warred with apprehension. Did I truly want to know more about Alessio's criminal enterprises? Would the knowledge make it impossible to stay? Or impossible to leave? I spent the morning in indecision, alternating between determination to confront the truth and fear of what I might discover. Finally, after lunch, I made my way to Alessio's private office. The security guard outside nodded respectfully, stepping aside without question. Alessio had clearly left instructions regarding my access. The office felt different in daylight, less menacing, more like the functional workspace of a businessman. I approached the Caravaggio, a dark, dramatic painting of Saint Jerome writing, and carefully lifted it from the wall to reveal the safe behind. My fingers trembled slightly as I input my birth date. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing several file folders and a small velvet box. I removed the topmost folder and opened it on Alessio's desk. Inside were documents detailing the Vicario family history, newspaper clippings, photographs, and what appeared to be police reports dating back decades. I learned that the Vicarios had begun as a Sicilian family that immigrated in the 1920s, establishing themselves first in importing businesses, before expanding into less legitimate enterprises during Prohibition. Alessio's grandfather had been a notorious figure in the heyday of organized crime. His father had begun the family's transition toward more legitimate businesses. The second folder contained information about Valentina, photos of a beautiful young woman with Alessio's dark eyes and a smile that radiated warmth. Police reports detailed her murder 15 years earlier, A targeted hit disguised as a mugging gone wrong, retaliation from a rival family after Alessio's father had refused a business partnership. The third folder was the thickest and most disturbing. Detailed accounts of Alessio's rise to power following his father's death shortly after Valentina's murder. I read with growing horror about vendettas, territorial disputes, and the calculated elimination of rivals. Yet alongside these accounts were others describing how Alessio had systematically moved family operations away from drugs and sex trafficking toward construction, real estate, and international shipping. He had established strict codes within his organization: no violence against women or children, no dealing with terrorist organizations, no involvement in human trafficking. It was a moral code with glaring holes, but a code nonetheless. One that explained why he had been willing to spare Dante at my request. The final folder contained information about me. Background checks more thorough than I'd imagined possible. Surveillance photos taken before I'd ever set foot in Trattoria Bella Notte. Detailed reports on my financial situation and my sister's progress at college. Most disturbingly, there were medical records. My blood type, allergies, even genetic screening results I'd never seen. The extent of his invasion into my privacy should have outraged me. Instead, I felt a strange calm settling over me as pieces clicked into place. Alessio hadn't chosen me randomly. He'd been watching me for months, gathering information, assessing my suitability for what? The position in his household? Or something more? The small velvet box remained in the safe. I lifted it out, hesitating before opening it. Inside lay a ring. A stunning emerald surrounded by diamonds, clearly an antique and undoubtedly priceless. A note beneath it read simply, "My mother's. Should you choose to stay." The implication stole my breath. This wasn't just about employment or attraction. Alessio was offering something far more permanent, far more binding. A place not just in his household, but in his life. I closed the box and returned it to the safe, my mind reeling. Over the next 3 days, I moved through the mansion like a ghost, performing my duties automatically, while my thoughts churned with everything I'd learned. I avoided the other staff as much as possible, retreating to my studio to paint scenes from memory. My childhood apartment, Sophia on graduation day, the view from my old fire escape, the life I'd left behind, rendered in oils and acrylics as if to preserve it before it faded completely. On the third evening, I heard the distinctive sound of Alessio's car on the gravel drive. Rather than wait for him to summon me, I went to his study, determined to face whatever came next on my own terms. He entered 20 minutes later, pausing in the doorway when he saw me waiting. He looked tired, the perfect facade slipping just enough to reveal the weight he carried. Our eyes met across the room, and in that moment of silent acknowledgement, I knew my decision had already been made. "You read the files," he said, closing the door behind him. I nodded. "All of them." And I understand more now," I said carefully. "About you. About this world you've built." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Understanding is not acceptance, Emma." "No," I agreed. "It's not." Silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken questions. "I found the ring," I said finally. His expression remained carefully controlled. "It was presumptuous of me to leave it." "Was it?" I challenged. "Or was it part of your calculation? Another test, perhaps?" A hint of anger flashed in his eyes. "Is that what you think? That this—" He gestured between us. "Is another manipulation? Isn't it?" I countered. "You researched me, watched me, created the perfect scenario to bring me into your world. The wallet test, the job offer, even the studio you set up, all designed to bind me to you." His jaw tightened. "I wanted to know you before you knew me." An uneven exchange. Yes. He didn't deny it. But necessary. My world doesn't allow for traditional courtships, Emma. The people close to me become targets, as Valentina was, so you vetted me like a security risk. "I vetted everyone in this house," he corrected. "But only you." He trailed off, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Only I what?" He moved to the windows. looking out at the darkened gardens. Only you made me question whether the life I've built is one worth sharing. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpectedly vulnerable from a man who calculated every move. I joined him at the window, our reflections ghostly against the night beyond. I can't pretend to approve of everything you do, I said quietly. And I won't be party to violence. He turned to face me, his expression somber. I can't promise you'll never be touched by it. My enemies don't honor boundaries or principles. I know. The ring in the safe seemed to pulse like a beacon, a promise and a warning intertwined. But I want your word that you'll continue what you've started, moving away from the old ways, building something that doesn't require bloodshed to maintain. Alessio studied me with those fathomless dark eyes. You're negotiating terms, he observed, a note of surprised admiration in his voice. Yes. I met his gaze steadily. If I'm to stay, if I'm to be more than an employee, then I need to know my presence makes a difference. Not just to you, but to the choices you make. He took my hand, his thumb brushing over the delicate key charm on my bracelet. You already have, he said softly. More than you know. Is that enough? I asked, the question encompassing far more than either of us could articulate. Alessio lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm with a gentleness that belied his strength. It's a beginning, he replied. The rest we'll negotiate day by day. And in that moment, standing in the twilight of his study with the weight of all I'd learned and all I still didn't know pressing around us, I made my choice. Not with the blind innocence of the waitress who'd found a wallet, nor with the willful ignorance of a woman too afraid to face reality. I chose with open eyes, aware of the darkness in Alessio's world, but also of the light he still sought, the possibility of redemption he hadn't fully abandoned. I reached up, cupping his face between my palms. Day by day, I agreed, sealing our pact with a kiss that tasted of danger and possibility, of boundaries pushed and others carefully maintained. Outside, the night settled over the Vicario estate, shadows and light intermingling in patterns as complex as the man who had drawn me into his orbit and the woman I was becoming by choosing to remain there. Not a captive, not a savior, but a partner in a delicate balance between two worlds, his and mine, darkness and light, power and principle. The gold key on my bracelet caught the lamplight, glinting like a promise. Whatever doors it opened from this moment forward, we would walk through them together,